Okay, so in lesson 4.2, let's take a look at some microgreens packaging options. So I think the first thing to keep in mind with packaging is you actually need to make sure you're packaging your microgreens in materials that are approved for food use. And this may seem obvious, but it might be one of those things you kind of overlook by looking at maybe some more unique packaging options. And so usually when you're looking at different types of packaging material for food, you're going to buy it from a supplier that has done the homework for you, and the materials that they're carrying are suitable for packaging food. So in Canada, the packaging materials, things that are approved is regulated by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and in the US, it's the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration. So every country is going to have this to some degree. So it's important to at least be aware of that if you're unsure about your packaging options. Like I said, most places you buy packaging from will be carrying packaging specifically for food use, and so that stuff will be suitable for that. But if you are unsure, most packaging actually comes with a certificate designating that it is good for food use. And I have requested that and got that from suppliers in the past. Sometimes it's one of those things where you see a packaging deal that seems too good to be true, price-wise, and so yeah, just keep an eye open for that and make sure what you're doing is suitable for food. So I think the place to start with packaging for microgreens is looking at your retail and market sales. And the standard packaging option for microgreens, which you may already be quite aware of, is the clamshell, which is shown here. Now, it's very standard, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. They're really, really good for display, coupled with a good label can really make a product stand out. They protect the product really well. You've got a hard shell around them. So like we talked about earlier, it's going to protect your product from contamination, and it's going to protect it really well in transport. Having a nice solid surface to put your label on makes it a lot easier to put that label on. And they're recyclable as well. So you can kind of see why this would be a preferred option for microgreens producers. But it's not all rainbows and unicorns. These things use a lot of plastic. And even if they're recyclable, I think we're in an age where we're just becoming so much more aware and concerned about our use of plastic. So keep that in mind. They're also very expensive. Clamshells are very pricey. When we went from basic bags to clamshells, it quadrupled the cost of our packaging. And I actually find them quite hard to package myself. You can actually see on this one up here, what happens often is as you're closing the package, the stems of the microgreens get caught in there and they get smushed, and it doesn't look good. And yeah, it actually damages the product. So just some things to think about there. It is the standard, and in a way, that's a reason to use it. But you know, the chances are, if you're looking at microgreens as a new way of making money, you're not thinking so much about the status quo. You're thinking about how to do things differently. If you're ordering lots of clamshells, they actually take up a lot of space because you want to order them in bulk in order to get you know, a good price on things. So keep that in mind. And it can actually be quite difficult, or I would say time consuming, to find the right packaging and size of packaging for your product. And we had gone through a bunch of different sizes and shapes and designs and things like that, looking at packaging before we got to something that we really liked. The nice thing is that a lot of companies that are providing this packaging will send you samples, so you can try a few different things out to get a sense of what you want to do. There are some biodegradable options out there as well, which in a way addresses the concern about plastics. But one of the things we learned here in British Columbia is the biodegradable plastic isn't necessarily better. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to end up in recycling or composting. And what some studies here found is that people using regular plastics were more likely to recycle those plastics. And so they were more likely to end up getting into a reusable stream. Unfortunately, you can't actually reuse these again for your production. They're single-use items, but once they're recycled, they can get back into the stream. So some things to think about there with choosing your packaging. And this is particularly important for your retail sales. When you get into bulk sales, this is where you're maybe selling bulk to grocers and probably to restaurants that are taking larger volumes. This is a lot more simple. What we tend to use is just regular produce roll bags, which you'll be very familiar with in grocery stores and whatnot already. It's very cost effective, and they're very, very easy to pack. And so you can actually pack large volumes very, very quickly. They're very common and easy to source, and there's lots of different sizes out there. So there's a lot of versatility in what you use. Unlike the clamshells, they don't have a very strong aesthetic appeal, and it's still yet more plastic for your operation as well. So these are things to keep in mind. There are biodegradable plastic options, and there with the bags, I often feel the biodegradable aspect is more important because soft plastics can often be harder to recycle than hard plastics. So that might help alleviate any tension you may feel about using plastics. So yeah, these are some things to keep in mind. And yeah, you don't want to be using clamshells for bulk sales because you don't really, a chef if you're working with someone or a grocer that's doing stuff in bulk, it's the product itself in that case that's doing the selling. So all you're trying to do is get the product to your customer in that case. And the bigger clamshells end up getting quite pricey. So yeah, a regular roll bag, it works really, really well for your bulk sales in that regard. Reusable options are possible. So where we use reusable totes with the food peddlers is actually taking stuff to farmers markets. We package to order, and I'll talk about that momentarily. So having these bins at the markets work really, really well, and they can be used for bulk customers like restaurants that are taking very big quantities, and you can just switch totes out as you come and do pickups and whatnot and drop-offs. You do need a really, really good hygiene and sanitation routine for these, so they need to be well washed and sanitized. And you need to keep track of them because you're going to spend more money on these containers, so you want to make sure you know where they are so you're not losing them all the time and having to replace them. A couple things to think about when you're looking for these types of totes. You want something with a really tight-fitting lid. These ones here have a nice little snap handle on them, whereas these ones here, the lids actually don't fit that well, and they're a little problematic for us, but they're very, very good quality totes. You want something that fits well into your coolers and fridges. So we picked things that, you could see this stacks and uses the space in the fridge here really well, and they fit into our coolers almost perfectly. And once again, it took us a little while to find out something that worked there. And it also has to be something that's food appropriate. And there's plastics that are more suitable for food than others. So make sure what you're getting is something that's food safe. And generally the way to do that is to go to a restaurant supply store. And they have lots of different packaging options there, and do some research about different types of plastics that are suitable for food. So there are lots of options, and this has worked really, really well for us for the market and for our bulk customers. So I recommend giving that some thought. Now, despite what I've said about clamshells and things like that, I do think it is important to be creative. And I think we see that in selling live microgreens, which we'll get to. But I think it's important to try different things out. The food peddler's business was actually built on this packaging here. It was, this is just like a Glad freezer bag, a medium-sized freezer bag with a very basic label, which was very affordable and easy to find. And yeah, I think it lacks some aesthetic appeal, but it also has some sort of uniqueness and quaintness, which can be a real draw for customers. So once again, customers aren't just looking at packaging, they also want a good product. And if your packaging maybe isn't the best, but your product is pretty good, people are going to come back for that product. What might be a challenge is getting people to try the product in the first place if it doesn't have that appeal. And farmers markets with a more elaborate display might be the place to do that. So definitely try things like that. I mentioned we do packing to order at the market. So it's tempting to kind of fill up a whole bunch of clamshells and have them on display and fill those up as well, but which we used to do a little bit. But one of the things we started doing was using the roll bags at the market and packaging to order. And one of the nice things about that is it saves a lot of pre-packing time. And you spend a lot of time standing around at a farmer's market. So doing the packaging there keeps you busy. And usually when you're busy and active around your stall, people notice that and it draws people towards you. If all you're doing is opening up a cooler and handing somebody a package and then taking their money, it's not very exciting. So people seeing you pack and move around kind of creates some activity that can draw people in. The other nice thing about this is it allows you to make custom mixes. And that way, if somebody wants, a little bit of sunflower and a little bit of radish and a little bit of pea, you can do that with each order. So you've got a lot of good flexibility there. And that's really appealing to customers that want to change things up a little bit, as opposed to having just sort of these prescribed mixes that you're kind of forcing them to take. So what I recommend doing is I don't want to get too much into suggestions on packaging. Just Google microgreens packaging and do an image search and take a look at all the great ideas that people have out there, and then decide what's best for you. I'll be honest, what's often going to happen is you're going to end up coming back to something standard, and there's going to be lots of reasons for that. It's what people expect. It's easier to source your packaging. It's easier to pack. It's easier to track, like whatever reason. But with some good, brainstorming and throwing some ideas around, you can come up with some innovative packaging, and that might be one of the things that really sets your microgreens business apart and helps you build a really good clientele base. So that's a look at packaging. I think there's a lot of things that could be discussed, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of what to expect.